Okay, so I can still see Roberta. Roberta, if you can see my slides, will you give me a thumbs up? Look good? Slides look good? Okay, thank you. We still have some people coming in and that pops up right in front of my screen. Okay, I think Liz is taking care of all that. There we go. Welcome, everybody. I'm Beth Caldwell, and thanks for joining me for the first time I've ever given this talk, 6 Steps to Overcome Imposter Syndrome. I think actually when I put this on the website, I think I put 4 steps to overcome this, but I just wrote the talk on Sunday, and so there are 6. So we will ask everyone who is coming in, thank you so much for joining us. We do have a recording going. And Liz, I'll just ask you as people come in, if their videos are on, if you could shut their videos off. Okay, everybody wants to come in at the same time. And when there's over 100 of you, sometimes that slows down the system a little bit. But this is the Imposter Syndrome workshop, masterclass for February. And here's what I want to warn you about. When you begin to recognize these habits, your confidence is going to be renewed and you're going to have a little bit more courage than you're used to having. And having renewed confidence and believing in yourself can create some pretty drastic changes in your life and your business. You may see yourself taking new risks, stretching outside of your comfort zone. You may notice that you'll stop avoiding success. You'll embrace personal growth, accept new challenges, and feel proud of your accomplishments. But here's all that is wonderful. But here's what's even better. When you step out of your comfort zone and you do something new, do something different, do something that's fulfilling, you inspire other people, men and women, children alike, young and old, to take those same risks. So this is going to be about a 30-minute presentation. As I said, it's the first time I've given it, so we'll see. But I want to stay here after and have a conversation. So once we stop the recording, if you can open up your cameras and open up your microphones, I want to hear what, really frankly and honestly, how you struggle with imposter syndrome and how this information can help you, or what more you need. Okay, so we'll do the presentation first and then we'll do questions and live coaching at the end. So this is one that you want to be present for. I know I attend webinars and Zoom meetings all through the week, and I do have a tendency myself to multitask and just get things done in that hour that I have blocked. But this is stuff that is not, I've never talked about before. It's really good. So be present, try to avoid coming and going. Use the chat. If you have an aha moment or something inspires you, please write it in the chat. Well, if you could keep your camera and microphone muted during the recording and then open them at the end. Yes, everybody's going to get a recording. I'm going to do something differently though. I think every person on this list is on my email list for my Focus Friday. It's my email newsletter that goes out every Friday morning. And so this recording will come out in tomorrow's Friday Focus. So watch for it tomorrow. And yes, you can share these tips. I just really appreciate your emails and your messages when you say, thanks so much. I really needed to hear that. And a lot of times people will say, would you mind if I shared this with a friend? Not at all. This is universal information. Please share it, because what is that saying? The rising tide lifts all boats. Okay. If you want to see my other workshops previous that I've done to this, they're on YouTube. I have a channel on YouTube. And then on my website, coachbethcaldwell.com, there's a blog, hashtag Beth Told Me, and that's where you'll find a lot of my past workshops. So I want to let you know right now, there is nothing for sale today. There is not going to be a pitch at the end of this webcast. Prior to COVID, prior to our pandemic crisis, I was traveling on the road at least once a month, speaking to audiences. And that's the way that I grew my business. I would do presentations in the community and usually get 1 or 2 clients and sell a whole bunch of books at them. And since we're not doing that, since June of 2020, I've been doing a webcast every month for free as my way of growing my audience, giving back, and keeping in touch with everyone, right? I've noticed through the COVID pandemic, there's sort of like One section of the population is just sort of like, I'm just checking out Netflix now, check in with me later, right? They're sort of hibernating. And then 1/3 of people really are spending a lot of time complaining. And then another 1/3 of people are doing the best they can in these circumstances and figuring out how to make it work. And that's what this webcast is. So if you like what you see today, please check out my coaching programs. I am a life and business coach for women. I do have a few men clients, but for the most part, I work with women. And I think my sweet spot is helping women who have a business of their own and they're making a few $100s a month and they want to create some systems and some structure in their business so they can make several thousand. And then for the woman who is working for someone else full time, I help with systems and structure so that your life is not so chaotic and your relationships aren't so chaotic. I have a lot of experience with both of those situations. And you can get my books at any bookstore nationwide or in the UK, Canada, and Australia. So if you like this, check out the books, check out the coaching programs. I'd love to see you. So what is imposter syndrome? So don't you love this photo? I love this photo, but you know what? Imposter syndrome is actually the opposite of this photo. It's the lion who looks in the mirror and sees a kitty cat. It is a syndrome that's planted in our subconscious mind from messages that we received since we were very young children, okay? It's be quiet, be skinny, be happy, don't complain. Not messages that were sent to us or given to us by our parents and our teachers, grandparents, and the people that taught us. They didn't tell us these messages to give us crippling procrastination problems or self-esteem problems. They did it because, you know, that's what's acceptable for girls. There are so many studies that show that in classrooms, I was reading and researching for this presentation, a study about teachers who considered themselves enlightened people, yet they still, even today in 2020, I think the study was from 2017, but recently, were a little bit more lenient with boys who had bad behavior. They still had the sort of boys will be boys attitude. Where did that come from? Why is there a different set of expectations on boys for behavior than there's for girls? It's because that's been planted in us. And if you think about us as females, I think everybody here today is a female or identifies as a female. If you think about us, even me, I was born in the late 1960s, okay? When I was born, I wasn't allowed legally to have my own checking account. I wasn't allowed legally to own land. It's really hard to believe, but you can look that up. People talk about birth control and the conflict about birth control all the time. But the real thing about being pro-choice is that in the early 1970s, all of the 50s, all of the 60s, until early 1970s, women couldn't get birth control unless their father or their husband approved it. And that's truly what pro-choice is. And so how imposter syndrome has to do with this is the idea that we've had for many, many generations that men are superior, they're smarter, they're stronger, they make better decisions, they take care of you. And, you know, so if you think about me being born, anybody that's around my age, when we were born, we didn't have those rights. We could get a checking account if our dad said we could, or if our husband put our name on it. That really wasn't that long ago. So think about our aunts and grandmothers and great grandmothers. Some of our grandmothers, when they were born, didn't have the right to vote. So this is where this comes from, the idea that women are somehow less than. So it really is sort of you being a cougar or a lion and looking in the mirror and saying, oh, I don't think I'm really that strong, okay? So they're harmful messages. They weren't created to intend us harm, but it's something that we need to be aware of. And I wanna let you know that imposter syndrome affects all of us. Many of you probably have read the book Lean In, written by Sheryl Sandberg. She's a Harvard MBA, and she's the chief operating officer of Facebook. And she says, every time I was called on in class, I was sure I was about to embarrass myself. Every time I took a test, I was sure it had gone badly. And every time I didn't embarrass myself, or even when I excelled, I believed that I had fooled everyone yet again. And one day soon, the jig would be up. How many of you can relate to that? So this is Joyce Roche. She is the CEO, former CEO. She's retired now, but she was the CEO of Girls Incorporated. Joyce has an MBA from Columbia University, and she wrote the book, The Empress Has No Clothes, which is completely about imposter syndrome. And Joyce says, I was so afraid of being wrong or looking dumb that I stayed quiet in meetings. I see this a lot in women. They don't speak at all because everything isn't perfect. And Joyce says, I wanted to make sure everything I said was perfect before I would chance saying anything. I see this in women even today on social media. They just don't want to look dumb. They don't want to offend people, so they don't say anything. And many of you will recognize Natalie Portman. She has won an Emmy Award. She's a Golden Globe winner. You may not know that Natalie is a Harvard graduate. She's also a social activist. She's very active in environmental causes, and she's a model for Dior. And she gave a commencement speech at Harvard. I think she graduated in 2005. And she gave the commencement speech in 2015, and she says, today, so standing there in front of the Harvard graduates, people many years younger than her, she says, I feel much, oops, I got a new mouse. Hold on a second, let me get back there. It's so sensitive. And what I'm gonna do here is, I have to move all of your photos. All of your photos are on the side of my screen. So let me move all of them. Okay, there we go. All right, so she says, today I feel very much like I did when I came to Harvard as a freshman in 1999. I felt there was a mistake, that I wasn't smart enough to be in this company, and that every time I opened my mouth, I would have to prove I wasn't a dumb actress. So this imposter syndrome affects all of us, and I believe it also in fact affects men as well. Okay, so today I'm going to give you 6 steps. I hope you're taking notes. I didn't think to give you all a handout, but take notes, write this down wherever you'll save it, or type it up wherever you save it. The first thing that I want you to do is recognize the imposter. Recognize the imposter. So when you are saying things like, I don't think so, not me. Oh, I can't really speak. Or, oh, do you think so? I'm not sure, right? Recognize that that's the imposter. When you want to say something aloud or even share something, and you get that resistance that you don't want to embarrass yourself or you're not smart enough. Here's one that I get all the time. Let me just get one more certification. How many of you have multiple certifications, right? Multiple certifications. Let me get one more certification and then I'll be good enough, right? We never see men doing that. We don't. So the very first step is to recognize the imposter. And that is done through some thought work. If you are somebody who meditates or has any quiet time, and how you might do that is you become aware of it. And this is the same, by the way, these 6 steps will really work for you in many different habits that you want to change. So say, for example, how I came up with this was a way that I stopped being judgmental. I noticed I was very harshly judging people years ago when I started doing personal development work. And so recognize that tendency to judge. Later in my life, I had the tendency to overbook myself. So the step 1 was recognizing that habit. Here I go, I'm going to overbook myself again. Here I go, I just said I wasn't going to book 3 appointments on Wednesday afternoon, and I just booked the 4th one. So begin to recognize the habit. In this case, the habit of imposter syndrome, the habit of not believing that you're qualified. All right. So you recognize it. And what happens is, as you begin to recognize this, what do I want to call this situation? I want to say this effect, this, somebody tell me the right word. Well, this tendency, we'll call it a tendency. When you begin to recognize this tendency, what will happen is you'll start to recognize it earlier. Okay. So what will happen is, let's imagine that you're somebody who you think that somebody's going to discover one day that you're not truly qualified and you're here, by some mistake. and you feel that way, noticing that you feel that way, notice that you hold back. So in the beginning, you'll notice this habit after it's happened. After you've been in a meeting or you've been asked to do something, or you're thinking about applying for a position, or you're getting an employee review and you're thinking about asking for a raise, or you're thinking about writing a book or starting a business, whatever, and you have that resistance. So recognize it. So first you'll recognize it after it happens. Then when you start to pay attention, you'll begin to notice it when it happens. A little too late to do something about it, but that's a good place to be, because very soon you'll begin to recognize just before you go there. And then you can say, oh, hello, imposter syndrome. Beth told me about you. And that's not true. And that's the second step. Step 2 is to remember the truth. And this takes a little bit of courage and a lot of confidence. And that would be when your imposter, your inner critic, is speaking to you and saying, who do you think you are? And don't embarrass yourself. And you don't have the right certifications and you're not qualified. When you hear that, and I have a good idea for you on how to do this. The first thing you want to say is, that's not true. So think about it. Is that actually true? If this were somebody that was actually a physical person sitting here next to you, could you say to them, that's not true? Or could you ask yourself, is that true? Is that really true? And truly look around at the other people in the room that might be considered. I'll tell you, this affected me when I was really in my early days, sort of tiptoeing around having a coaching business and looking at other people coaching and thinking, well, I don't look like her and I don't have her degree and I don't have the 25 years of business experience or the MBA or all of that. Okay. But it frustrated me when I saw people who really weren't good at coaching, making tens of thousands of dollars a month coaching. And then people would come to me to fix the problems. So that started getting frustrating to me. So I started paying attention to the fact that sometimes having a lot of credentials doesn't necessarily make you good at what you do. I have a certain talent for really being able to intuitively help people and cut through their head trash, right? So what is the truth? Here's what I wanted to share with you, which is a really great tip. And this really helped me. And that is when your inner critic / imposter gremlin is talking to you, I want you to ask yourself, would you speak like that to anybody else? Would you speak like that to me? So if you had an idea, let's imagine there's a lot of you on here today. So I see a couple people, and I don't want to call anybody out because I haven't asked for permission, but let's just say you want to quit your job and start a business. Of course, that's going to make you feel panicky inside. But you might catch yourself thinking or looking in the mirror and saying, who do you think you are? You have no qualifications to do that. You haven't been trained to do that. You're not smart enough or good enough, or maybe she can do it, but she has this, 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 and this. And what will my husband say? What will my neighbor say? What will my kids say? What will my coworker say? What will my boss say? You get into all of that stuff. So when you find yourself there, I want you to wipe your mind clean for a moment and imagine that I said to you, hey, I'm thinking of starting a new business. What would you say to me? Would you say any of that? No, you'd be like, really? Tell me. Oh my gosh, that sounds wonderful. I think you'd be perfect at that. I'm excited. I can't wait to see it. So step 2, remember the truth. Is this actually true? And I'm just going to add this because I made it up right here on the spot. Would you think that about anybody else but you? Thanks for being patient with me as I learn how to work these slides. I'm grateful. I'm going to say this. I'm grateful for this wonderful computer. There we go. Step number 3, and I do not know if Heidi is here today. Heidi, if you're here today, say hello. I love this picture of my client, Heidi. And step number 3 is trust your inner voice. So number 1, recognize the imposter. Number 2, state the truth. And number 3, trust your inner voice, trust your intuition, your guidance, whatever you want to call it. And look at this picture of Heidi. Heidi is She is a leadership coach and she has leadership events. She runs something called the Townsend Leadership Program here in Western Pennsylvania, which is now available, worldwide because it's all done virtually now. But when we're not in a pandemic, she hosts these full day in-person leadership intensive workshops where people join for a year and they come once a month to become better leaders. Heidi, like me, spent a lot of time in corporate America watching people do things in the just most insane and unproductive way. And it was eating at her soul. It ate at my soul. And just like, there has to be a better way. But it was a really scary transition for her to walk away from a very comfortable corporate position. I wish I had a picture of Heidi back when she worked in her corporate job and we could put it to here. Isn't her soul shining? But just like you and just like me, when she was making that decision to make the change, I am sure she had a voice of doubt speak to her many, many times, not to mention the outside voices that we get of the people who should you, right? How many of you have been shoulded today, right? You should do this and you should do that and you shouldn't do this and you really should do that, right? People should us. And I always think it's interesting, the people who are telling us what we should do are not really people who have the lives or businesses that we want most of the time, right? Those are the people that we're making them very uncomfortable by doing new things. So step number 3, trust your inner voice. Step number 4, this is a big girl step, and that is take full responsibility for your thoughts. And that is something you might want to do with a coach or a therapist if you need help with this. And that would be, I have been self-sabotaging myself for 2 decades. I have had this dream to write a book or start a business or end a relationship or change careers, whatever it is for you. And I've avoided it because people may think that I'm different or make fun of me. Or because I'm worried that I'm not good enough, but I can see clearly that I'm more talented than the person who's doing it. So taking full responsibility, and I'm not talking about being hard on yourself. This is just a step in admitting the truth, right? A lot of people will not take full responsibility here. Here's what they will do. I hear this a lot. I have a new coaching program starting on Monday. So I've been hearing these kind of things a lot from people who just aren't ready to take the step. And they'll say things like, work is really busy right now. 2 people quit and I'm doing 3 jobs. My daughter's getting married. My son is going to college. My son is struggling in 3rd grade, right? This homeschooling, and believe me, I know this homeschooling is really tough. So that's legitimately, that is legitimately a good reason to say that you're busy, but don't use it as an excuse. For the truth is, I don't think I'm good enough. So what happens is we make up a lot of excuses. I'm too busy. I don't have enough time. I don't have enough money. I've heard that I don't have enough money so many times. And then I see women like literally staying at the, I had a woman one time tell me she couldn't afford $75 for something. It wasn't something of mine, but she said, that's just too expensive. I think it was like a half-a-day workshop. And then literally the next week she puts on Facebook, she was staying in St. John at the Ritz-Carlton. So she had money. She just didn't want to spend money on that because truly she wasn't ready or she didn't think she was good enough. So this is where you pay attention to, yes, I'm homeschooling my kids. Yes, I'm really busy. Yes, I've somehow found myself doing 3 jobs, but I don't want to do this anymore. Just tell the truth. So this isn't about beating yourself up. It's about taking full responsibility and admitting what the truth really is. This is the easiest and most fun part of conquering the imposter syndrome. It is really important. And I think especially now, as many of us, not just in the United States, but around the world, are not socializing as we used to be able to do. It is so important that you align with other people who think like you do and who think big and who think out of the box and are not, look, there's nothing wrong with being traditional, but it's not for everybody. So if you are somebody who thinks big and wants to do things just a little bit different and not do that traditional checkbox way of living your life, okay, I have this, I have this, I have this. What else does society or the media say that I need to have? Okay, I have that. A lot of people check those boxes off their whole lives. They're very frustrated and dissatisfied come midlife or at the end of their lives. And so if you align with other people who think the way that you do and who are, if this is something that you do, who are people who do thought work, if this is something that you enjoy, people who aren't afraid to explore things like gender norms and gender bias and imposter syndrome type of things and how we can overcome that. Aligning and spending time with other people like that will feed your soul and it will help your self-esteem and your confidence. Now, right now, most of us are only meeting by Zoom. I do know that some people in different parts of the country and the world are meeting in person, but not everybody's comfortable with that. So some things that you can do to align with others: one, come to meetings like this. Two, you can read books. You can listen to podcasts. If any of you want to know the podcast I listen to, ask me at the end and I'll share with you my favorites. YouTube has the most amazing things on YouTube these days. We do not have cable television here at this house. We haven't had it for years, but I do get YouTube, and my coach has a YouTube channel. Sometimes in the morning, I will get up and instead of putting on the news, I'll put on my coach's last whatever workshop that she did. And I probably don't have time to listen to the whole thing, but even just 5 or 8 minutes of it sets me on the right path. I've aligned myself with somebody with that kind of energy, and it really puts me on just a better solid ground. So aligning with others, really fun to do, really important to do. What is that quote? You are, I heard this so many years ago. I probably heard this 30 years ago. I think I was just out of high school when I heard this quote, and it's by Jim Rohn, and it says, you are the sum of the 5 people you hang out with most. At that time, mostly I hung out with family, but if you went outside of family, there were some people that really dragged me down. There were some girlfriends that only talked about their boyfriends and only talked about the complaints and gossip and soap operas and those kind of things. And that energy is contagious to us. And so that was the first time I heard it. And many times in my life since then, I have had to shift and choose to spend my time with people who feed my soul rather than people that drain it. So pay attention to that. You don't have to leave your family. You don't have to, some of you can't help who your coworkers are, but you can choose who you spend your time with after work, right? There we go. All right, this is the big one. I saved this one intentionally for last because it's the big one and it is the scary one. And that is influence change. And I think it's even more important that you make sure to hang out with like-minded people, men and women both, because we're so much more powerful together than we are one-on-one. But having the courage to talk about this and share this information and point it out when you see it. Actually, that's not true. When you hear somebody say, oh, honey, let somebody stronger lift that for you. You could say, oh, I think we can do this. Let me give you a hand, right? Or when you hear somebody say to a little girl, this is the one that personally triggers me when somebody says to a little 6 or 7-year-old girl, so tell me, have you planned your wedding, or what kind of wedding are you going to have? Did you see that Susie had a wedding on a beach? Don't you want to have a wedding on a beach? That one really gets to me. Not that I'm against weddings or marriage or anything like that, but let's let the girl decide if she likes, social studies or English or math or science or technology. We don't have to rush her into planning a wedding at this point. Okay. So that's habits. Those are generational habits. Back when the times when all people really had to celebrate were births and weddings, right? So it's been programmed into our DNA to be very excited about these things. That prolongs life when people get married and have babies. But where we are today in the world and in the universe, we need stronger, smarter women. So here's something you can do. Here's something, if this makes you feel anxious, like, who do I think I am? Or I'm not in any position to influence change. Yes, you are. Let me give you an example that you can do. If you see a woman who has published something, written something, created something, won an award, give her your heartfelt congratulations. A lot of us see those kind of things and we think, wow, that's wonderful, but we don't say anything. So I would say share that information and point out that information. That's a really good first step for you to being seen. And I'm not saying that we don't acknowledge men. Of course we acknowledge men. There are a lot of wonderful, amazing, incredible men who have influenced great change in the world. But let's try to even that playing field out a little bit. So one thing that you can do that can get you comfortable is to praise somebody else. Another thing you can do is when you see imposter syndrome, point it out. And if that makes you nervous, you can blame it on me. You can say, Beth told me, that's our hashtag. Beth told me that that's a gender bias, or that's not true, or that's programming that we do. And soon, the more that you hang out with other people, the more that you embrace this in your own life, you won't have to use me as a crutch anymore. You'll actually feel confident in saying it yourself. So step number 6 is to influence change. All right, let me recap that. So number 1, recognize the imposter when you see the imposter, when you feel the imposter, or when the imposter has had some kind of effect on your career or life. Then remember the truth, trust your inner voice, don't trust the shoulders. Think about Heidi and that beautiful picture of Heidi, okay? Take full responsibility. The truth is, I feel nervous about asking for a raise. Not, I couldn't ask for a raise because my boss doesn't like women. Say the truth. The truth is, I don't want to ask for a raise because it makes me feel very nervous. It's the first step in moving forward. Align with others because together we're stronger. The rising tide lifts all boats. And once you start to master this, influence change. So I want to know what you're thinking. In a couple of minutes, we're going to start chatting. I hope you guys have taken some notes. I see some things in the chats, but I want to know what you're thinking. Have any of you thought about times when you didn't go for something and you regret that now? Is there a way you can go for it now? Have you thought about some of the excuses that you tend to use that keeps you from stepping forward? I want to know what you're thinking. Let me make a couple of announcements first. I want to let you know that my Success Circle begins Monday. If that's something you're interested in, be sure to reach out to me today by email or not social media. Reach out to me by email so we can be sure to talk. My next workshop, I'm not doing a workshop in March. I have an awards event on March the 8th for International Women's Day, and then I have my Success Circle launching. So I'm not going to be offering one of these webcasts in March, but in April, many of you have been asking me about writing a book. And so, yes, you can write a book. It's Friday, April 16th at 1:00. It will be a virtual workshop. It is not on my website yet, but save the date and watch my Friday email newsletter for that notice for when that comes up. If you want more information like this is my newest book, Women Lead. It actually came out 1 year ago, last March. And there are tips in here on negotiation. Let's see, there's 12 chapters in here. Some of you have this book already, but we talk about resilience, productivity, branding, confidence, negotiation, having high expectations, using meditation. Actually, I have to tell you something about this book. The first 6 chapters are very, very, so if you have this book, you can tell me if you agree. They're kind of very, I want to say the word structured. It's like, how do you do this? How are you productive? How are you emotional? It's very like scholarly, scholastic type of that kind of thing. The last 4 or 5 chapters, intuition, intention, wisdom, influence, those chapters, I have to tell you, they're my favorite. It's like those chapters wrote themselves. They're not so much about I'll tell you what it is. The beginning of the book is the doing part of the book. The end of the part is the being part of the book. And that's what's had the most influence on me. So that's my favorite part of it. So if you have that book, and if you're like me, you've only read 1 chapter or half of 1 chapter of the book, jump to the end and read like chapter 9 or 10, and they're wonderful. One thing about this book, it's the chapters are really small. They're meant so that you can read them in one little break. And let's stay connected. Hopefully all of you are on my email newsletter. You get my newsletter on Fridays. Please read that and share it with your friends. And if you've missed any of my webcasts, you can always find them on my website, coachbethcaldwell.com. And then just go to the Beth Told Me page to catch up on anything in the past. that you might have missed. And now I am going to stop with my slides, and Liz, you can stop the recording.